At the fact that I'm working on Tanto Monta for a while now. And I finally made it through the rulebook, which, while not, as far as I can tell, a complete mess, it feels like a reasonable amount of effort has been made to make sure, that it doesn't suffer from some of the ills that some of the other recent GMT publications have. It is very, very difficult going, okay? Among other things, a lot of it has to do with the core choices of this game. And I'll get more into that later, but what it essentially comes down to is using a CDG style game to cover the amount of detail that's being covered in here. And I haven't looked at the cards yet. They look like they have a fair, decent amount of text on them. But I gotta tell you, about a third of this big old 60-page rule book is special case shit. Things that apply to one country, things that are like one-shot things, things that a card generates. That's a lot of special case stuff to be throwing into a CDG style game. Now look, obviously EU probably has about that much level of special case rules. On the other hand, EU is a game that's going to take, 60 hours to play, at least. Probably more than that, but for a good fast playthrough, I would say 60 hours is about right. This is supposed to take under 12, okay? I think they actually put it at less than that. What do they say? Somewhere they tell you. I know I saw it. Yeah, here actually 6 to 7 hours is what they say. Basically an hour a turn. I'm guessing nobody's going to make that until they're very, very familiar with the game. And like some other games that I've seen recently, there's a huge hurdle with all those special case rules and everything. But right now, this is a setup woes situation. And I do these every now and then when a game is just too painful in the setup. And I can give you some examples. There's a lot of stuff, and maybe it was in the rules somewhere and I missed it, but there's a lot of stuff that I'm not quite sure where to set up. And as I work through the setup, I'm not getting an answer for that, okay? So I've got units that are withdrawn from a person's force pool. That's fairly easy. They usually have a marking on them like this X here. The Muslims might have something different, like a whole bunch of counters they're supposed to withdraw. I don't see it. I don't see it. So they have something weird. And some of this has to do with the graphics on the counters. A lot of it has to do with the graphics on the counters. First of all, counters are printed like this to indicate regulars and like wrong type of counter. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck these are. Like this to indicate regulars and like this to indicate militia. I think that's a carryover from Here I Stand. Most of the countries have images for infantry, cav, some of which I can't tell are cav. This looks like two guys, one running in front of the other. Turns out that's the cav for the Kingdom of Granada, which are the Nazrids or something like that. But then we've got camels, which are exactly the same as normal cav. Nothing special about them. Just wanted to use a different image. I kind of get that, but I'm finding a number of things really difficult with the colorations. Here's one of them. We have no nationality indicated on a piece. These two pieces are from different nations, as far as I can tell. This is Portugal, this is Aragon. They look like they're the same fucking color to me. That's one problem. I had them sorted in the same bag because, I punch and prep my games beforehand, and then I kind of sort things by color and whatever I think can work where. Well, I had tons of counters. I had no idea where to put them, having not played the game before. I would kind of suggest not prepping the game and just kind of punching it out and using it as you need it, and then figuring out how things are supposed to go back once you've actually played. Because honestly, this is a game where I've found this to be one of the most difficult factors of it. But there's a whole bunch of other things that are problematic. First of all, what kind of triggered me a moment ago, there's these guys with bows. I don't remember any discussion of them. They look like normal North African pieces, which go over here. They aren't. They aren't regulars because they don't have militia on the other side. I really don't know what they are. I'm just gonna, I've got some with crosses, which means that there's gonna be some special rule which brings these into play, which means there's probably something which indicates these. They might be Canary Island troops or something like that, but we've got things like tribal units. This is Navarre, which is a minor country. And I don't know why I don't have it with my other minors. But anyway, yeah, we've got so many major powers in the game whose counters don't say who they are, which is particularly problematic when they're using what is, to my eye at least, essentially the same color. I can tell a little shading difference between Aragon and Portugal here, but not much more than that. And chances are they're not going to interfere with each other, but man, that was a bad color choice. They would have been better off, I don't know, you know. I was going to say using the purple, but yeah, I see why you'd use the papacy as purple, right? And I'm not sure I see why Genoa would be pink. There are also some kind of confusing instructions on it. There are pieces that I don't know what you do with. For example, this one. Okay. So this gives certain players victory points if they own Tunis. Since it's got a green band on it, it may only be the Muslims. And it would indicate an expansion of their territory there. Great, that's fine. But the problem is that there's no instructions of putting this anywhere. It may be you're just expected to remember to hunt down a counter for certain territories that you take. But then these aren't really helping remind you of anything. So it feels to me like they have to go on the board. Of course, some of them I can't even find. So this one here, Bajara, it's got a picture on it, which leads me to believe that it's going to be, there it is. Okay, that's one I found. And here's another one that I know has to be on the map somewhere, Zahara, which I would assume is near the Sahara Desert. I don't think it's going to be on the rest of the map, although there are ones that connect to the Canary Islands. I do not know where this is. I've looked for it, but I looked for that one and couldn't find it. It might be in Spain, but I don't know. And I just can't find it. If I run across the name and remember that this counter's floating out there, I will put it there. What is this? This is probably a unit that I set aside to place on the board and then pulled another one or something. You've got a lot of these pieces that are for events and whatnot. You've got, again, this is another location. No, this is Allah is great, but it looks like a location marker. I don't know, right? Is that going to come up from an event? Is that going to come from something else? It kind of tries to give you a picture of what it's going to be. I'm pretty sure there's no location called Allah is great. Wait, is this Sahara? That's Sahara right there. And it's got a triangle on it to help remind you of the shape, which is helpful, okay? There are some little clues, but the counters are really tiny and it's very hard to judge them. I also have a lot of counters that I, had sorted as best as I could think, And that sorting hasn't worked out very well. Again, not knowing where things are and whatnot. So like, you know, these, I didn't know if they belong with one country, what they belong with until after I read the rules. But I'm having a real hellish time figuring out what goes where and whatnot. So there's something that says put fortresses on here. The only thing that I know of that are fortresses are these, but there are like control markers that are used for fortresses, and there might be something else. There are just so many little counters. There's also instructions to put these victory point counters on a player's card. But there's no instructions to set the initial victory points in the scenario. At least not that I've hit yet. We're getting to, it might go here. Yeah, here we go. So we're going to get the full victory points. Is this going to cover everything I expect? I'm not sure. I kind of doubt it. So let's look at the Muslims to begin with. Let's see what I get from them in victory points, because it says I should get 15. I get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Weird, but yeah, whatever. That's 9, 10, 11. I've got 4 more victory points that I don't have any counters that express. I don't know where they came from. Maybe I'll find something else that gives them to me. But again, I'm just left with this, oh my God, I have no fucking clue what I'm doing. Now, they don't really tell you how to set this up. They kind of tell you to put those in place, but it's just really, and I don't have all of these because some of them have been mixed in, I think, with other counters that I have, you know, that I sorted by color, thinking that I'd be doing them by nation, but it's not really that way, and it's just so fucking horrible. I get the feeling once you've played it once, you kind of know how to set it up and you can work with these, but this is the biggest hurdle that I've met with since I started, other than reading the rules, which in and of itself was a big hurdle too, because reading the rules, a fair amount of them feel like a Here I Stand type game. But then you start getting into the special cases, and there are these procedural cases going through them. And there's just no way you're going to have a grasp of everything that's kind of going on that's going to generate victory points and whatnot. My approach to this is I'm just going to put aside the whole try to play this like it's a CDG, like it's an easy to play game, like it's kind of meant to be fun and interactive and all that. But rather look at the CDG element as an additional barrier to the kind of game that I feel like it really is, which is much more like the old EU, although on a much smaller scale. But it feels very much like that. One problem with that, though, is EU tended to give you triggers as to, and I don't know if this will or not, from events and whatnot, reminders into the rules in different places. What I'm not finding is a lot of reminders. Rather, what I've got is just this huge... So, EU's triggers tended to be via events. Okay, so if a given event was effective, and then you might have to look up a rule, and there would be, like, you know, a reference into that rule, which might not be the right reference, but it's okay, or something to remind you into that. I'm less certain that there's going to be anything on the cards that pushes me into the special rules. So we've got special rules in here that have to do with you know, almost everything. Well, almost everything that I've read in the rules. Like, you know, the 2/3 of the other rules are all kind of, yeah, I kind of get that. That all makes sense. It's the 1/3 of the rules that's special cases that's just not sticking at all, because it's just like a cookbook. It's completely procedural. And unless something directs me to go to that, I'm not going to remember half of them. Like, probably not going to remember a quarter of them, to tell you the truth. It's a matter of, wow, I have real fears along that line, but trying to hold most of the rules in mind seems impossible in this case, at least for me, just as it would be in EU. You know, in EU, if I come up to, oh, the Holy Roman Empire died. Huh, yeah, I remember there was a rule on that, okay? And if I get something like the Morisco Revolt triggered by an event card, I remember there's a rule by that. Triggered by other means, I'm not so sure, because it can be triggered multiple ways, and a lot of the things in this game can happen through multiple pathways, and I'm very, very worried about that I'm not going to be able to reference into the rules very well. By the way, a lot of times I complain about the amount of playtesting a game seems to have gotten. Here's the list of playtesters. Now, most of them are from Spain. But you've got one hell of a list of people who, you know, are all credited and apparently worked through this. And that may be part of why the rules themselves seem solid, even if not approachable. Feel like some kind of blind testing would have very quickly said, look, this is not, but the problem is in the original design of the game. The concept of let's make a CDG, a short game, you know, under 10 hours is the intention, right? That has this much weight and burden of Chrome on it is really a bad idea. I would also suggest that I think the CDG mechanism, just like in EU Pop, it's going to be a further hindrance to people playing it, right? Playing it well. Because you start making things of that, at least my expectations. Some people may have different feelings about this, but my expectations when I pick up a CDG is that most of what I'm going to be doing is based on the cards. I'm going to be making considerations based on the cards. And that's a heavy, heavy burden. But it is the fun of this type of system, right? And it feels to me like the heavier the cards get, the heavier the amount of Chrome in the game and everything like that, the more systems or more special cases especially. Because Here I Stand has a couple of significant different systems in it. The more special cases you start handing into it and whatnot, the harder you're making it. You know, you want it to be kind of a fast-playing, easy type of decision-making, a way to deliver events and such not in a smoother fashion than an EU-type game would do. I have huge fears that this is going to fail completely on that, but I can't guarantee you anything on it. All I do know is that reading the rule book led to those fears and put me in a position of, yeah, you know, the best I can do is hope that the cards direct me into the rule book and that I don't miss a lot of the different rules, the same way that the events in EU drive me into the rule book. There was more going on, but yeah, this is just turning out to be a nightmare. And I feel like it's a good idea to give people a warning. Because who knows, with luck I might keel over or something before I get the first video up or whatever. But to give people some kind of a warning about just how painful I'm not even going to go with learning curve here. Because when I say I'm going to play kind of like EU, what I mean is I'm going to play as if I don't give a shit what's going on. I'm going to just try to, you know, do historically accurate things and see what happens. And it might lead me to say, yeah, I need to play it again to see what's going to go. I don't think that's going to work very well because of the additional burden of the CDG style of play. If the CDG gets too heavy, and the hands, I think, are relatively large in this, at least at times. I know some of the other games of this type have done that. And when you give me too big a hand size, I'm starting each year or whatever with too many decisions to make, and then each player has their own action list, which is different. I haven't even looked over the charts and tables over here. We have those two, and then so each player has their own player aid tailored to their special actions. It's going to be really hard to get into any kind of flow, and that makes sense from a Here I Stand point of view, right? But like Virgin Queen, it feels like there's just too many differences between each of the powers, and honestly, maybe not a lot of reason for a lot of them. But I'm not sure about that. I did have the same kind of problems when I played the EU Pop, Europa Universalis Price of Power, which was, although there was a lot I liked about the game, and there were some things that I want to change, and maybe would have faced that if it had been a more traditional design in a lot of ways. The reliance on cards, on expressing game state, in ways that, I don't know quite how to put it, that are easy to have out there, but harder to see because you didn't have to put any work into recording them or whatever, right? So, for example, in EU, you're filling out a spreadsheet each turn, right? That kind of seals things in your brain as to what you're doing and what your plans are, as well as, honestly, it actually seals down what you did, right? You don't have there's not a lot of interactive action during the player turns or during the turns in EU. What there is, the only place where there's interactive action is really in the military phase. Everything else is really kind of, you record everything down, and then you make some die rolls based on that, comparing doing what everybody's trying to do. So basically you pre-plan everything, and then you go through and you execute it all, and then you go to a military phase, which is pulsed, and players move their units around, and react to each other. But that's actually a pretty minor part of the game. Most of the game is played dealing with the spreadsheets and then resolving what you put on them. Something like this, like Here I Stand as well, like the EU Pop, each player is getting a single action that they take, and so whatever planning they do, well, especially playing solo, I'm waiting until I come around through the other players. So again, that's a heavier burden, but I feel it's a heavier burden even when I'm playing such a game opposed. Of course, I don't know. I'll have less people asking me questions while I'm talking. But yeah, this, and it's really a shame because it's something, it's really in a period that I love, one that I love to take looks at. It looks like a huge attempt has been made on trying to get a certain degree of realism and detail into that CDG flavor. But it may just not be a good fit. And part of that for me, and I can look at it and say, I have the same feeling that I do with CDGs as I do with kind of Euros. When I sit down to play a Euro, I want it to be something where I don't have to do horrible juggling of the choices, figure out the best one, set up a sequence of actions that'll make that choice work, and then try to remember it till my next action, my next time I get to play that side. That's hellish for me, and I find that to be the case with CDGs. So once they get too heavy, just like with the Euros, and again, you would say, hey, solo's your problem there. It's not. I mean, maybe it's part of it. But when I sit down to play a Euro with other players, if it's one of those heavier, complicated Euros, I can't remember what the fuck I planned on doing the next time around. That kills me with Age of Renaissance, which I think is very popular among those heavier Euro players as well, for various reasons. Well, here we're getting to, an extreme of that, and I'm more and more finding the CDGs are just getting too burdened. I kind of had fun, not a CDG, but a coin game with Pendragon, which is an ultra heavy, overburdened version of the coin series, right? With way more stuff going on than there should. But it took me about half a game to get into the flow of it at all. And I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work here. That's kind of the best case scenario, I think, is that, it's going to take a long time for me to start liking this at all. And I'm probably going to be cursing and all that other, what the fuck, I always do. Oh, yeah, one more thing, since I mentioned the playtesters. I noticed somehow or another they got Enrico Dandolo to playtest it. I thought he was a little old. He's a little old by the time the period of this game comes around. I'm just amazed. I glance over to see if there's any names I recognize and anything. I'm like, well, yeah, I recognize that, but not in the gaming community. He was the Venetian Dodge who engineered the Fourth Crusade and the attack on Constantinople. At like 90 years old, too. So he was a little old at the time that he was alive. All right. I'm going to send this up. It's more or less really just, hey, why is this taking you so fucking long to get to the table? Well, first of all, I haven't even started reading the history stuff, which there's a fair amount of stuff here, right? A big example of play, which I don't know how much I need to, I have no clue how the game's going to flow, but I'll tell you this much. It's all special cases, and I just don't feel like a sequence of, an example of play is going to help much with that. The designer's note's probably going to be really useful to me, and it took me so long to fucking read the rules. We have a list of cards and resources. I would rather stay away from these, but I might need to pick them up. Some locations, and then the history itself on a year-by-year basis. So a fair amount of information that I'd really like to read some of to get through it. There's things like the Grand Captain, Grand Capitan for Castillo, for Aragon, but he may be Castilian. That I'm not sure who that is or if it represents multiple people who held that title. So I'm like, yeah, I don't know. But there's definitely a fuzziness in terms of sometimes using, among other things, sometimes using names that I don't feel like they're necessarily the one I would choose. So for example, John II here in Aragon. I feel like that should be Juan, but okay, if it's John, that's fine. But then, I don't know who we have, but we have João, I don't remember how it's spelled even. The Portuguese version of that, instead of calling him John. You kind of feel like, make your choice. I don't know. I'm just not sure. But yeah, I'm really worried about this one. Really worried about this one. All right. I'm trying to remember the last time. I had setup woes with games before. I'm not sure how much they fit in with. Oh God, I didn't get the rules either. The rules were just unpenetrable to me. Maybe. Pretty sure that has happened. All right. Let's load this up.